Welcome movie enthusiasts to Movie Logic Explained, your ultimate destination for unraveling the mysteries, hidden meanings, and fascinating details behind your favorite films. So grab your popcorn, subscribe, and let's dive into the captivating universe of Movie Logic Explained together. Let the movie magic begin. In the first scene, Mason Podius admits that he grew up with no sense of purpose in life. He did things that most people do, and thought he wanted things that most people want. As a result, Mason made rash decisions. He decided to enlist in the military and become a special forces operative. With only a year left of law school, Mason had finally discovered his mission, something that made him happy. Mason married Jenny, and they had a girl named Casey. However, while on a mission to eliminate a man named Van Nuys, Mason lost not only his purpose in life, but also his comrades. Mason left the service and became a lawyer despite not having completed law school. In the present, Mason is on his way to Casey's school to drop her off, and the small girl tells him about a kid who keeps trying to kiss her. Mason instructs his daughter to punch the kid in the throat if he attempts to kiss her again, and leaves for work. After dropping Casey off, Mason's office is visited by an old friend named Sebastian Earle. Sebastian controls a company named Contracted Defense Initiatives, or CDI for short. Sebastian hires Mason to provide security for a journalist named CLA Wellington, who is heading to an exclusive interview with Ponia President Van Nuys. Mason recalls Van Nuys being their aim before his comrades died and wishes to decline, but when Sebastian offers a substantial sum of money, Mason eventually agrees. When Mason returns home that day, he discovers that Jenny was summoned by the principal at Casey's school because his daughter smacked the boy who tried to kiss her in the throat. As a result, Mason and Jenny have an argument, further damaging their already troubled marriage. Jenny is concerned when she learns of the job Sebastian has offered Mason, but she eventually decides to let Mason go, knowing that his departure may be precisely what he needs to repair himself and be happy again. Mason meets journalist Claire Wellington, and after introducing himself, the two of them head directly to the airport. Claire briefs Mason on his role, which is to defend her at all means. As soon as they land, Van Nuys greets CLA with a kiss on the cheek while Mason is extensively searched by Van Nuys' security. When they get into Van Nuys' car, Mason is surprised to hear that Van Nuys has done research on him and is aware that he is a former armed forces operative. On their route, in the middle of a bridge, the security car in front of them explodes, and they are ambushed by rebels who are here to assassinate Van Nuys. Mason approaches the wrecked security car and pulls out a massive revolver. Van Nuys urges Mason to assist him in protecting his people. After understanding it is a planned coup, Mason refuses, claiming that it is Van Nuys' own people who tried to assassinate him before walking away, followed by CLA. They go into the bush and stop for CLA to rest, and Van Nuys comes shortly after having followed them. Mason calls Sebastian for assistance, and Sebastian promises him that he has their location and will send them a chopper. Van Nuys requests to use the phone after the call, but Mason declines. Van Nuys then threatens Mason with arrest for being a foreign spy, but Mason pulls out a gun and threatens Van Nuys with it. CLA steps in and persuades Mason to assist Van Nuys. Van Nuys calls his nephew George, who is surprised to learn that Van Nuys is still alive. Van Nuys is aware that he is the mastermind behind the coup and assures him that he is still well. Claire is surprised to find that Van Nuys' own nephew is working with the rebels, but Van Nuys adds that Jorge is simply being exploited by the rebels because he is an imbecile. Van Nuys urges them to help him protect his people, but Mason walks away, CLA following, leaving Van Nuys alone. CLA tries to get Mason to assist Van Nuys so that she can report everything, but Mason is determined not to assist Van Nuys. CLA is perplexed as to why Mason appears to be angry with Van Nuys. When Mason watches the chopper flying away after dropping off two shooters, he realizes that they aren't coming to help them. The gunmen pursue them while the chopper fires shots at them. As they flee, they come to a halt in a clearing near a fallen tree, and Mason positions a sniper to await the helicopter. Claw, on the other hand, stands back and records everything that happens. Mason successfully snipes the pilot, and they flee into the woods just as the chopper crashes. Claire just keeps running and running until she realizes she has lost Mason. She shouts out for Mason, but is confronted by the two gunmen. She hides behind a tree and clutches a tree branch, silently waiting for one of the rebels to approach the tree she is hiding in. Mason appears unexpectedly and engages in combat with the rebel. Claire watches as Mason chokes the rebel to death. Claire emerges from her hiding place as Mason stands facing CLA, but a rebel smacks him on the head. Van Nuys arrives and shoots the rebel while they are stranded. Meanwhile, Jorge and his crew are inspecting the wrecked chopper when a car pulls up. Colonel Jan has arrived to warn Jorge about his failure to assassinate Van Nuys. Colonel Jan murders one of Jorge's soldiers, and Jorge swears to make amends. Returning to Mason's group, the trio has halted by the river to relax for a while. CLA approaches Mason to start up a discussion and learns about Mason's most recent expedition. Mason tells CLA about the plane crash in the same area, and how he lost his comrades. After a little respite, Van Nuys leads Mason and CLA to a village and presents them to the village chief and Pino, the village chief's son-in-law. The trio decides to stay in the village till the next day. Van Nuys and Claire decide to conduct an exclusive interview. After showering, during the conversation, they discuss Van Nuys' attempted assassination, and the latter explains why he believes companies are behind the attempt. Outsiders have exploited Ponia's land and mineral riches, and corporations have made billions off of them. Lanthanides were discovered recently in Ponia. Lanthanides are rare earth metals that are at the heart of every new technology, and businesses want to exploit that new resource, but Van Nuys refused, which is why they want him dead. Mason, who has been filming the interview, gradually realizes that Van Nuys isn't such a nasty guy after all. Mason wakes Claire up the next morning and tells her she needs to get dressed since they are leaving. Claire, on the other hand, is hesitant because she wants to learn the complete tale of the Punian insurrection. When Van Nuys enters the room, he encourages Mason to stay and see the truth, before indicating that he knows why Mason was sent to be CLA's protection. Mason calls Sebastian, who informs him that he had been told to dispatch a man to kill Van Nuys. Sebastian chose Mason because he assumed Mason would also want to murder Van Nuys because he had lost his colleagues as a result of him. Mason hangs up without saying anything else. He calls Jenny on his home phone, conveys his gratitude and affection to Jenny, who requests that he return home safely. Mason takes out his gun and approaches Van Nuys after the phone conversation. Instead of shooting Van Nuys, who is with CLA, he walks past them, taking his belongings and telling CLA that they are leaving. When Colonel Jan and his troops arrive, the group flees. However, when Van Nuys notices the rebels attacking the village, he comes out of hiding. Meanwhile, Claire persuades Mason to assist Van Nuys, because the colonel will undoubtedly kill the villagers after killing Van Nuys. Mason grabs Van Nuys with his horse, and they ride away from the insurgents. Mason and Van Nuys manage to flee, but CLA is apprehended. Knowing they can't defeat Colonel Jan and his rebels, Mason and Van Nuys decide to focus first on how to save CLA. The two spend the night in a church before meeting with Van Nuys' trusted acquaintance, a man named Bobby, and asking for his assistance. The next day, Mason departs after speaking with Bobby to meet with Colonel Jan while Van Nuys remains hidden. Mason and Colonel Jan stand in the middle of a seemingly calm village, guns aimed at each other. One of Colonel Jan's rebels forces CLA to her knees and points a gun at her head. Colonel Jan threatens Mason with death if he does not give him Van Nuys. Mason begs for Van Nuys to come out. Then Van Nuys emerges with a smug look on his face, followed by a swarm of civilians who surround Colonel Jan's crew. Colonel Jan and his troops are encircled and defenseless, so the three easily escape using a secret entrance. The gang infiltrates Van Nuys' office in the palace where Jorge is, while CLA is recording. Van Nuys speaks to Jorge, warning him that the rebels would simply dispose of him once they obtain what they want. Van Nuys offers to save Jorge from the rebels, and the two embrace. When General Martinez enters the room, Van Nuys attempts a polite conversation with him, but the general pulls out a gun and shoots Van Nuys. Mason grabs CLA to keep her safe while Van Nuys pulls out his rifle and shoots General Martinez. When the general is dead, Mason helps Van Nuys up, and he pulls the bullet from his suit, telling Mason that he's wearing a bulletproof vest. Inside, their joy is short-lived, however, as they discover Jorge has been shot. Van Nuys cradles Jorge and sobs as his nephew dies in his arms. Ponia troops storm into the room, pointing their rifles at Van Nuys. Van Nuys talks to the soldiers, assuring them that he is not the enemy and that he too wants to help his people. Colonel Jan's rebels approach the chamber slowly, standing close behind the Ponia soldiers. As he finishes his statement, Van Nuys points with his eyes towards the rebels, and the Ponia soldiers turn around, exchanging fire with the rebels. Mason, CLA, and Van Nuys shelter behind a desk, with CLA still filming everything. A war breaks out inside the palace, and Mason makes sure to defend CLA and even Van Oz. Colonel Jan and one of his men chase the trio, while the Punian soldiers and the rest of the rebels are fighting. Mason orders Van Oz and Claire to go first while he stays behind to battle Colonel Jan. Colonel Jan pins Mason to the ground. Mason discovers that it was Colonel Jan, not Van Oz, who killed his buddies. Colonel Jan struggles as he pushes the knife down to kill Mason, but CLA arrives and knocks him unconscious. The pair then travels to Van Oz and the Ponia soldiers, who are being outnumbered by the rebels. Mason falls to the floor and grabs a gun before opening fire on the insurgents. Meanwhile, Claire and Van Oz are staring at him in astonishment, with Claire continuing to record. Sebastian and his men drive through the gate and into the palace. They assist Mason and the Ponia soldiers in defeating the retreating rebels. The war has ended, and Claire has revealed the entire truth about Van Oz and Ponia to the world. The palace has been repaired, and Van Oz has been granted the opportunity to tell the world his story. Before the interview, Van Oz thanks CLA and Mason for their assistance, especially CLA, who made it possible for the world to witness the truth. The interview begins and is broadcast worldwide. Mason returns home from his job in Ponia and is greeted warmly by his wife and daughter. Mason receives a text from Van Oz one day, informing him that he has sent Mason a small gift. That small surprise turns out to be a large sum of money transferred to Mason's bank account. Mason smiles as he walks back to his car where his wife and daughter are waiting and invites them to spend the remainder of the day enjoying his happy family. Thanks for watching. Enjoying the cinematic journey so far? Don't miss out on the next blockbuster breakdown. Hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up if you're loving the content, share it with your fellow cinephiles, and don't forget to ring that bell. Subscribe, like, share, and ring that bell. Let's make every movie moment count together.